Well, yeah, another steam engine. This time a full-size one. We've had plenty of miniature ones just recently, so I think it's time for a full-size engine. Now I spied this on eBay and I thought, oh, that looks quite interesting. German, obviously, by its general design, and it turns out that it's a Josef Falk. I don't know the model number, but it's very old. I would say it's probably early 1900s, something like, 1914, 1915, something like that era. It's in okay condition. There's a bit of rust on the firebox, but it's interesting in the fact that it's on a wooden base, and it's been very nicely made, the wooden base, and there's been a metal ring machined up that the firebox is actually bolted to. However, Josef Falk engines always had metal bases, either round or square, so obviously it's lost its original base at some point in time. The chimney is also missing, and it would appear that the whistle has been soldered into the top of the boiler, whereas normally it would be threaded. Other than that, I think it's pretty much original, but it's going to need a bit of work cleaning up. I'm going to get rid of that rust and clean up the boiler. But no, it's a very nice example of a Josef Falk upright model steam engine. Let's have a close look at the top. Yeah, I think you can see here that the whistle has been soldered in. Now, as you can probably see, there doesn't appear to be a safety valve, and this is not as uncommon as you might think. Certainly on early German model steam engines, there's a fairly weak spring which holds the cylinder to the cylinder plate here, the engine plate, and they rely on the weakness of this spring to act as a safety valve. So if the pressure builds up too much, the steam pressure becomes too much for this spring, and it will simply move the cylinder away from the engine plate and vent steam that way, and that acts as a safety valve. So yeah, I have no reason to believe this won't run at all. It doesn't appear to be any obvious leaks from the boiler that I can see. Obviously I haven't pressurized it yet, so we don't know, put any water in it, but yeah, I'm hopeful that this will clean up nicely, and we'll have a working Josef Falk vertical boiler model steam engine. Okay, a little bit of progress on the little Falk, Josef Falk upright engine. I've taken it apart. I didn't bother to film the disassembly because it took all of a minute. There are very few parts, as you can see. There we go. That's basically what the engine does. All the parts there are really to it. So fairly straightforward. I have taken all the original lacquer that was on the wooden base off, taken it down to the bare wood, and there were a few holes that had been filled with a very white coloured substance. There, and that one down there. I've drilled that out, whatever that filler was, and I've put hardwood pegs in there, so hopefully they'll blend in quite well with the actual, colour of the wood. And the boiler is in the vinegar, as it normally is. And I couldn't see any easier way of detaching the boiler from the firebox. I've literally just soaked the fire. It's sitting in the vinegar, and the little metal ring that had been made up that screws to the base, and then you screw the firebox to that's in there as well, because that was quite rusty. So basically all we've got left to do is leave this overnight for the vinegar to do its job. I'll put some finishing oil on this once I've sanded it down, and then polish up the boiler, and it can all go back together. It's a relatively simple restoration on this one. Well, the little Josef Falk upright is all back together. I haven't bothered showing you the clean up process on this because it was really simple. I didn't do anything to the flywheel other than just polish the outer rim. Bit of elbow grease and metal polish to polish up the boiler, and then obviously the firebox had its vinegar bath to get rid of the rust, and then a very gentle going over with a brass wire brush, and it's been repainted with high temperature engine paint, and I've refinished the base. So yeah, very straightforward. It didn't take me very long at all on this one, very easy. However, it is still missing a couple of parts. It's missing the burner, which I'm not too bothered about, because if I ever want to show it with a period correct burner, I have actually got one. But for the purposes of steaming, we'll be using the little little circular 1-inch Bix gas burner, and that fits in there just perfect. So that'll do for our steaming purposes. But it's also missing the chimney. Now I do want to do something about that. I do want to replace the chimney, and I only have, I think, 4 in total Josef Falk engines, but one of them does have the correct chimney, so I'll bring that one in and you can have a look at it. So this is my Josef Falk, which does actually have a correct chimney, and we'll close in on the chimney so you can have a good look at it. Now this is fairly typical construction for chimneys for model steam engines from the German engines of this era, which is the late 1800s and the early 1900s. This is in fact thin tin plate rolled to a tube. Then they either have like a lap joint or a lip joint on them, and that's it. They're very, very simple. They were either blued or painted black depending on the engine in question, and they normally had a turned brass chimney cowl. So yeah, fairly straightforward construction. However, I don't really have any method of accurately rolling thin sheet tin plate, so that's not really an option for me. Yes, I can make the brass cowl, that's no problem, do that on the lathe. But I have an alternative method when it comes to making chimneys like this, and I have shown it before in some of my other steam engine videos, but I thought, you know, I haven't done it for a long time, so I'll show you what I do in this one. So what I generally tend to do to fabricate those kind of chimneys is I use stainless steel tube. There is a little bit I've cut to length. I've also, it's quite thick walled this, so I've actually turned that end down using a boring bar to thin out the wall thickness, so that now sits quite nicely over there. And again, I've guesstimated the length. It's obviously not going to be quite as long as the one on the other engine because this is a much smaller engine. So that's great for the chimney itself, but of course it's completely the wrong colour. However, with stainless steel, it's actually very easy to change the colour, and I'll show you how I do that. So the process is quite simple. Here we have a little bath with some motor oil in it. Doesn't matter what the motor oil is, it's not really relevant. And there's the chimney in the vise, but it's on over a metal pole. I'm going to heat that up with the gas torch, and as I do, the stainless will change colour. When I get it to the colour that I think is most appropriate, I will then simply quench it in the motor oil, and that there is basically your job done. I'm not sure how well the colour change in the stainless will come out on the video, but hopefully it will. The only real difficult problem with this process is getting a nice uniform colour. Starting to go a nice blue at the bottom there, but then the bottom is thinner, of course. So the thinner part of the stainless will change colour first. Doesn't generally take that long. We're nearly there now, I think. I think that will do it. Lots of smoke. Word of caution here, the first time I did this I actually used a plastic pot to put the oil in. Not a good idea, because the metal is hot enough to melt the plastic. So, yeah. And that's really all there is to it. So we'll let that cool off and I'll fish it out, you can have a look. Well, didn't turn out too bad. I could probably have gone a bit darker with it, to be honest. It's very difficult to determine the colour correctly, especially when you've got lights all over it for the videoing. But no, I mean, that's not too bad at all. Well, I think it looks pretty good on the engine. What we've got to do now is make the little brass cowling. I can turn that up on the lathe and the Falk will be done.